Hello, I just got out of work not too long ago and home with the dog, cooking a chicken dinner for the two of us. And I feel like doing a video. Somebody told me I got a kind of a serious video to make, spiritual videos, got a little bit of the paranormal, Christian elements, as well as other, and I've debated telling that story for a while now, and it has to do with somebody that was very dear to me, a part of my life, a big part of my life, and that person's no longer with us in the flesh. And an unusual person, very exceptional person. So, somebody told, well, I've had a head cold for the past week or so, and kind of had a long day, and I've got tomorrow off. So this is my Friday night. So I wanted to tell a story because I'm bored. There's really not much going on, and I felt like sharing something. I get something out of doing these stories. It's company. So I decided, let's do something a little more light. I've got a lot of stories. They're not all paranormal or spiritual or, So I decided to tell a couple of stories about, two different stories about close calls with flooded streams. And one has to do with the spring thaw in the mountains. And one has to do with a hurricane that I was caught up in as a child. And how I darn near got killed in both of these. And both were, I don't know, my own fault both times of just doing things I should have known better than to do. And by stupid stuff, I consider myself pretty smart. But in some ways, I'm not. Definitely not. We all have our blind sides. I've got mine. And I've done some really dumb things. And probably am not done doing dumb things. But these two dumb things almost got me killed. So I'll start with the one, the flooded mountain stream. And it really takes place when I was probably in my early 30s. Driving through the Adirondack Mountains probably around April, when after a long winter, and New York State, upstate New York, gets buried in snow. I think I've said that in more than one video. Oh my God. Hands down my favorite beer. I'm going to have to take a trip to Ireland, just a pilgrimage. So I'm driving through the mountains, and it seems like it was Route 69. I'm not sure. I will look on the map and find where it was. I remember where it was on the map. This happened, like I said, when I was in my early 30s. And there was very little traffic on the road, and I had a long ways to go. I was going home after visiting my parents on a weekend, and I was kind of anxious to get home. And I lived up in the mountains, the Adirondacks at this time. Actually, I was at Plattsburgh Air Force Base, which is way up northern New York, near Vermont, Canada border. And the winter snow had all melted. And in the mountains, if you've had a lot of snow and the ground's already saturated, it can cause for, as most of you know, some very severe flooding. And so I'm winding through these roads, and it's very remote. There's no houses or other road junctions for maybe 20, 30 miles or better. And suddenly, and there was no traffic on the road either, and I found out for good reason, the road was probably closed. There was a stream running alongside. There's mountains to my right, mountains to my left. So I'm in a valley, winding through this valley with mountains on either side, and a big mountain stream off to the left, a little ways off from the road. And normally this stream is ankle deep to knee deep, in the summer. Nice little trout stream, gentle. But right at this time, it looked like Niagara Falls. It was a raging, brown, foamy torrent. There were chunks of ice that have obviously broken off of the mountains. Chunks of ice about as big as a van, or huge, as big as a car. Chunks of ice and trees just tumbling along in the torrent. It was quite impressive and scary. So I'm driving along. I'm kind of anxious to get home. And I come to a part of the road that's flooded in front of me. And I stop. I'm in a Jeep. I'm driving a Jeep Wrangler, all right, which I thought was a pretty good off-road vehicle. So the road's flooded in front of me. It looked very calm. I mean, the water had risen up and flooded the woods from the stream. And the woods were flooded. And the water, and where the woods and the road, you couldn't see a current. I mean, you couldn't see a current. It looked like pond water. The only place a current was visible was where the stream was. And there it was a roaring brown mass, torrent with giant chunks of ice and trees tumbling along, and really quite violent, impressive. But I'm looking at this, and it's about maybe 100 feet of the road in front of me was flooded. But it really didn't look like anything threatening. It looked very calm, like I said, it looked like pond water, very still. And I'm thinking, man, I figured, I looked at the map. Back then I didn't have a cell phone, so I had a paper map. Got that out. There was no other traffic on the road. I'm parked there in front of this flooded out area of the road. And I thought, if I turn around, I'd go all the way back, it's going to be like 60 miles out of my way. That's what I figured. To go back the way I came and take a different way to get home. It's going to be another 60 miles or better, I figured. So I'm looking at this in front of me. And I thought, heck with it, I can make it. I'm sure I could drive through this. And I started driving through it. No problem. I got about halfway across this very tranquil looking pond, flooded side in front of me. No, again, trying to put a picture in your mind, it did not look dangerous. It just looked like, well, the road was flooded, but it was very calm. Just like I said, like pond water. It didn't look that deep either. I was wrong. So I'm driving along through this water in my Jeep, when suddenly my Jeep instantly became a raft. I could sense my tires had left traction, all of them, and I was floating. And I was floating towards the raging mass. And I'll tell you what, I've been through a lot of things in my life, parachute jumps and mishaps, and some of the things I've told, and helicopter incidents and all kinds of stuff. And I wasn't afraid. But when this happened, when I'm driving along, all of a sudden I could tell that I could turn my wheels and it wasn't doing it. My tires were off. My Jeep was floating. And I got my Walmart. Oh, welcome to Walmart. It's the holiday season, right? So I got all my headache with it. And I'm telling you, when those tires broke traction, and I was floating, and I could sense the Jeep was floating, getting carried into the current. Because the lesson is, that little calm area actually had some kind of a current underneath it. Because I wasn't just floating at a standstill, I was going towards the current. It was carrying me towards the current. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I remember, it's like one of those times where like my stomach turned upside down. And I thought, I actually thought, I'm not going to live through this. If I go into that mess with my Jeep and I was getting swept into it, I said, I actually really thought this. I said, they'll probably find the Jeep, after everything calms down. They probably won't find my body, maybe never. I'll probably be washed 2 miles downstream, you know, or some hunter will find my bones someday or something. And I thought, just when I thought, man, I'm a goner, and my tires grabbed, and I drove out of it. I'm like, oh my God. Lesson learned, never try to drive through a flooded road. No matter how safe it looks, how calm, how easy, it looks like a simple thing to drive across a flooded section of a road. Don't do it, because there is a current underneath that. And your car, or even my Jeep Wrangler, which was kind of jacked up, made for off-road, becomes a raft instantly, and you're powerless. But all you can do is pray and maybe jump out and hope you can make a swim for it or something. So yeah, I learned a lesson there. I never do that again. That was one encounter with a flooded stream. I was going to tell two. The next one has to do with a hurricane, and this one's a little bit longer. And I'm really congested, getting over a cold. I'll tell you where I caught the cold. Was making that last video I posted, the spiritual hierarchy and the dark rebellion, ghost, where do they fit in? Well, I was out there in the rain shooting that, like a slow rain. And yeah, I caught a cold after that. Even missed a day of work. All right, now I'll go back to when I was about 11 years old in upstate New York. And we had a beautiful house. Oh, so fortunate. My mom, she said that God gave her a vision. And we weren't made of money growing up. But my mom said that God gave her a vision of the house, and that he was going to take her into it. And she did. She, through very, very successful business practices and things, and I don't know how she did it. I was just a kid. But she came into possession of a very, very nice house in a state. A beautiful place. And I was fortunate to have that, to grow up in my formative years. I and my brothers and mom and dad, and dog, and chickens. But down over the hill of this place, in our yard, was a stream that I played in all the time. This is before video games, and I was fortunate. If I was born a generation later, I would have been wrapped up in video games. This story never would have happened, because I would have been indoors playing video games. As it were, my favorite places to play was in the creek or in the woods, out with my BB gun, doing things I shouldn't be doing sometimes, hunting birds, and I really regret that to this day. I made a story about that. Mr. Kincaid, Death of the Great White Hunter, is when I finally occurred to me to stop hunting small animals just for the sport of it, and I never did again. And to this day, I don't even hunt. If I had to, I would hunt, but I don't, because I don't have to. I work at Walmart. I can just go to aisle A19 and get my ramen noodles. I don't need to shoot anything. Or buy my old GMO chicken in aisle 39. I know where everything's at. But we had a creek, and I played in it often, so did my friends. And this creek, honestly, it was like knee deep, not even knee deep, ankle deep. And here and there were deep places where we would swim. As in deep, we're lucky if it was chest deep. But for the most part, that creek was ankle deep. And, Hurricane Agnes came through. And actually, upstate New York usually does not get hit with a hurricane. So this was kind of an unusual event where this hurricane swept up through the Northeast. And when it hit us, my mom used to take us to Camp Casawasco. I was at Camp Casawasco. I was a Christian retreat. And man, I remember it knocked the power out and blew trees down. It was quite a storm. And the next day we went home. That's another story. that Camp Casawasco time. Maybe I'll tell that sometime. There's a couple of stories in that. Maybe I'll start telling some of my childhood stories. If you like. This is one of them. So the next day we went home, and instead of a storm, the storm was over. The sun was out. Everything was calm. And I was home in that beautiful place that I was talking about that I was lucky enough to grow up in. The Summit House in Alton, New York. Alton, Alton, New York. Summit House. The old Summit. It used to be called that when we lived there. But down below the hill, we lived on top of this little hill, and then down the hill, and then there's a creek. The water had flooded incredibly deep from the creek. I mean, the water must have been, and I didn't take this into account. The water must have risen a good 8 feet. And like the last story, I mean, the water was flooded up in our yard and in the woods. Like the last story, except where the creek was, and the creek didn't even, it all looked very calm, brown water. I mean, to look at the surface of it, you wouldn't think there was anything going on. It looked very calm. And when I walked in my yard, my friend and I, Philby, we walked in the yard. There really wasn't any current in the yard either. We were walking barefoot, and there was a lot of logs and debris floating around. And I had this brilliant idea. I had a lot of brilliant ideas when I was a kid. And I said, hey, Philby, I said, let's get some logs together and lash them together and build a big raft. And get some poles, and let's push it out and float it into where the creek was. And let's ride it, the creek, all the way to the lake, Lake Ontario, which was Lake Ontario was a good 4 miles away, right? That never was going to happen. But that was my idea, just feeling like an adventure. Bad idea all the way around. Well, we spent some time waiting. We took our shirts off and we kept our shoes on. But we took our shirts off and hung them up on a tree limb. And then we started walking around grabbing logs, and there was debris floating all over the place. And we started lashing together this big wooden raft. And we finally had it together, and we had a couple of poles that were about 10 feet long, both of us. And in our heads, we were going to get out there where we knew there was a creek and a current, and we were going to use these poles and float this raft, like on our knees or standing up, like on the movies or something. The two of us were going to float it out to Lake Ontario. Right out to the lake, Lake Ontario itself. Well, this is what happened. My dog getting fussy. Hey. Oh, all right, I'm going to drive on. He gets all angsty when I got to give him a snack. Shut him up. Hold on. I got to pay him. For good behavior. Oh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yum. All right, now leave me alone. I'll tell the story. So we both pushed this raft out to where we knew the creek was, because we played in that creek all the time. And it really didn't look that dangerous, but it was brown water, kind of foamy, right after Hurricane Agnes, the day after. And as soon as we both stepped foot off what was the lawn into what was the creek. You couldn't tell because it was all just a brown, we're floating this thing in chest deep water, and it all looked the same. You really couldn't tell where the creek bank was, And we stepped off into that current, and it grabbed us like it had us by a rope. I mean, it's just like the other one. The surface looked so calm and unthreatening. The current was so strong, it swept the shoes right off my feet. Both of my shoes swept off my feet. And I think his too. His were gone too. And we knew we were in trouble instantly. But we managed to climb up on our raft and decided that we had our poles on there. Decided, well, let's give it a go, right? And so I'm going to try to carry through with this even though I knew we were in trouble. And so I put the pole in the water. It just swept the pole right out of my hand instantly. And him too. So there was nothing we could do now. And our little raft was moving along pretty fast. And all we could do was lay down. We both laid down on it and hung on. And the raft's going down this flooded creek. And we had no control where it was going, right? And we weren't on it very long, maybe a minute or two, when the raft hit a tree head on with him on this side and me on this side laying on our bellies, hanging on to the front of it. And the raft split in half, and I was on this half, he was on this half, and really my half wasn't, he went off that way, and I'm fighting for my life at this point because I'm kind of half in the water, half hanging onto these logs. And I saw him, I just saw him go off that way towards the woods. Don't know what happened to him. And I'm hanging onto these logs, and I'm getting swept down this flooded creek. And ahead of me, a huge tree had fallen into the creek, a very large tree. And it was half submerged, half of it was out of the water, half of it was in the water. But there's a giant oak tree. And all the limbs and everything with it. And I hit that, and it pulled me right off of whatever I was hanging on. I got pulled off, and it swept me up underneath this tree. And I got tangled up underwater in the branches. It caught me in the branches underneath the tree underwater, and I couldn't move. And I'm penned up against these branches, and the water's about this high, the surface about this high above me. And I remember, it was, like I said, it was a sunny day, and I couldn't move. And the water was brown, and I could see the sun. I'm looking up to this brown water, and I could see the sun as a little disc up above, a little disc of light. And it looked so beautiful. And I thought, I'm going to die today. I thought that, I'm going to die. This is the day I die. And I didn't panic. I did not panic. I just thought, this is the day I die. I kind of felt resigned. There was nothing I could do. I couldn't move. So I reached my hand out towards the sun. And my hand broke the water by about this much. And I'm just reaching up like I'm trying to touch the sun. And suddenly a hand grabbed my hand. I'm not kidding you. I'm pinned up underneath this tree in this brown water, and I could see the sun as a speck of light through the brown water above me, and I'm reaching out towards the sun, and my hand broke the water by about wrist, and I'm just looking at my hand out there in the blessed light and air, and then a hand grabs my hand. This isn't an angel story. You'd think it sounds like it almost is. A hand grabs my hand and pulls me up to where I could climb out and onto the half-submerged tree. And there on that tree was my friend Philby, Tim Philby, my best friend growing up. And oh my God, he said he saw my hand. And he's standing at the top of this giant tree. He's standing there barefoot with no shirt. He got his pants on. We were both barefoot. We both lost our shoes. Our shirts were still hanging up where we left them. And I swear, I'm not a sentimental person, but I still see him standing there in the sunlight. We were both a couple of skinny teenagers, you know, just kids, really, 11, 12 years old. And he's standing there with a big grin on his face. He just saved my life. I saved his life too once. Oh, but he saved my life, hands down here. And I'm looking at him. I'm astonished. I wanted to give him I think I did give him I gave him a hug. I said, oh my God. I said, how did you know to find me? Stop. You see, he gets angsty when I'm talking like this. I go, how did you know to find me? And he said, well, he got swept away, and he got swept to a calm place in the woods where he wasn't in any danger. but he said he knew that I was in trouble. So he went looking for me, God bless him to this day, and he saw my hand sticking out of the water. And he climbed out on that tree I was tangled up in the branches underneath it, and half the tree, it was a big tree. I mean, it was like this much of it, dry in the sunlight, and the rest was submerged. And he came out on that tree, and he pulled me out. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was so grateful. And we walked out of that, and we waded out, and we got our shirts on, and went home that day. Never told our parents about this. We had some explaining to do what happened to our shoes, because now we needed new shoes. They were gone. They're probably buried in mud out there somewhere, like antiques now, you know. I'm surprised my parents didn't tell us to stay away from that flooded creek. I don't think they had any idea all the shenanigans me and my friends got up to back in the day when our guardian angels were working overtime constantly. And I lost a lot of friends too. I lost my share of friends to misadventure. So that's another story. But those are two stories. I just felt like telling some stories tonight. Nothing heavy. I got a lot of childhood stories, Army stories. I got a lot of stories about a lot of things. And I don't know. That was something. I mean, how did he just saw my hand sticking up out of the water. And he found me. He saw my hand. It's a miracle in itself. This isn't an angel story, but just the same. How did he find me? But he did. And he climbed out there and he grabbed my hand and he pulled me out. Oh, that guy and me, we had some adventures. We were always like just trying to live this high adventure life, just getting into trouble and not trouble like that, doing things that could get us killed or injured. No common sense kind of trouble. Well, that's that. Those are two stories about flooded streams, and I'm going to tell a story about Angel and Dehexen, which is about somebody very dear to me, and a very unusual story, a very unusual person. And I was going to tell this story a long time ago, but this person was very private about her life. She liked to keep her life private. She was from Berlin, Germany, and very beautiful woman, a dear friend of mine. And I wasn't sure if she would approve of me telling talking about her and our times together. And she passed on some years ago. But I figure if I don't tell her full name, I've got a lot of pictures of her, and I'd love to show the pictures because she was gorgeous and extremely intelligent and very charming person, intriguing person. I figure if I don't show any of her pictures or tell her real name, I think it'd be all right. So I got to get my head around that a little bit. How to tell that one respectfully. It's more of a tribute to her. I'd like to pay a tribute to the people I love that aren't with us anymore. Like my mom. My mom's with us. She's just where we all go. You know, she just got there before me. Just like her mom did her. Got there before her. I found this guy I found in the lawn in front of Winchester Cathedral in England. This little Roman soldier guy. A long time ago when I went to Winchester, England, to see what's in Winchester, England. And I highly recommend visiting that town if you want to kind of get a snapshot of medieval England, at least back then it was. It keeps her company. All right. That's all. Thank you.